Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1. That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Greaves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Greaves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. No matter how long you've been living with or close to type 1 diabetes, it remains an incredibly complex condition to manage. And while there's a wealth of information out there to dig into these days, knowing what to pay attention to can be just as daunting. So to say that today's guest has gone above and beyond to help address this would, in my mind, be a huge understatement. John Pemberton is the founder of The Glucose Never Lies, an online education platform for people living with type 1 diabetes, created after his son Jude tested positive for diabetes antibodies. Using John's personal experience of living with the condition for nearly 20 years, alongside his professional insight as a diabetes specialist dietitian and diabetes technology consultant, this incredible resource breaks down all manner of complex topics in ways that even I could understand. And I shall be forever indebted to John for the information he's put out into the world. So John, welcome to Type 1.
Oh, first of all, thank you for the invite, and thank you for the very kind introduction. It's always interesting to see how things will be received, because you're just there in your bedroom, or not quite in your bedroom, but yeah. in your office, kind of putting things on there, thinking that it might be useful for people, because it would be for your family. But yeah, if other people get something from it, then it's nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I need to personally thank you, and I'm so happy I've got the opportunity to do that, because I stumbled across The Glucose Never Lies when I was switching from one insulin pump to another, which, isn't as common. And, I sort of had my previous insulin pump down, and I just could not find the information I needed. And I did my training in a second language, which is a whole other challenge. I stumbled across your stuff, and it just felt like I'd been given kind of the key to the pump, really. And I think the way you're placed in this, it came from something born out of love, which is incredible in itself and powerful in itself. But then you've got your personal experience of living with type 1 plus this professional expertise. And in this world of kind of content overwhelm, which is maybe the opposite of what was around when I was diagnosed, I do just think it is quite the resource. I really just can extend my personal gratitude for that. So there is a lot to your story. There's a lot to dig into today. So before we get into that, I like to ask, how are you, and how are those truth-telling glucose readings today?
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. So all good in general, which is nice. Just settling into the post-Halloween madness. I've got 2 young kids, so we just decluttered the house of pumpkins and skeletons. Glucose, interestingly, generally very well controlled. I mean, I guess I live diabetes, live and breathe it. I've got it myself. I help work at the Children's Hospital in Birmingham, help look after 300 children and people. I'm fairly obsessive as a human being. So having the reason why it's called The Glucose Never Lies is because for me, they're changing everything for understanding that diabetes is a a very personal thing. And by that, I mean, I say this to every family that I meet is we're going to give you how to drive a car. So we're going to teach you how to drive at 30 miles an hour, 2 hands on the steering wheel, checking the rearview mirror and the side. And you're going to follow that for about a month. And then you're going to realize that actually to get where you need to go, sometimes you have to change and break those rules or bend those rules. But without continuous glucose monitoring, it's very difficult to do that because you didn't have the immediate feedback. You didn't have, when I do this, does it work? When I do that, does it work? And most importantly, does it work for me? Because there's so many studies out there, even for people without diabetes, that when someone eats a banana, someone's glucose level will shoot over 10. The next person, it'll stay at 5. And there's no rhyme or reason apart from what's going on in their body just produces that effect. So as a healthcare professional, it's impossible to look at someone from the outside and know exactly what's going to happen. So we just give good starting points. But the only way to develop your own personal management is by something like continuous glucose monitoring. So for me, I'm fairly obsessive with it, so I tend to run pretty tight control. However, when you kind of things get crazy with work and whatever, it's like anyone, diabetes goes from top of the priorities down a little bit and things slip. So it's generally pretty in target, but there are times where diabetes just has to go to the back burner and you just got to get on with life and then, pick up the pieces afterwards. But yeah, in general, good.
Yeah, great. I love to hear it. And I think that speaks to like one of the taglines you have for the resource. You talk about combining the science and art of type 1 diabetes. And I would absolutely agree that it's both. But I think when it was presented to me and on diagnosis, which was, nearly 30 years ago now, the art side of things, the human element and the emotional aspect kind of wasn't quite so exposed or articulated. So can you tell me where you find that intersection for yourself, but also in the people that you come across?
Yeah, sure. I guess the only way I can explain it from my point of view is I was diagnosed at 26, 27, and I was already a dietitian by that point. And I already had plenty of modules on type 1 diabetes. I, in quotes, knew my stuff. Actually worked kind of within diabetes in the renal clinic. So in theory, I knew the background of it. But then as soon as I got diagnosed, I was like, whoa, okay. That wasn't meant to happen. That wasn't meant to happen. That wasn't to happen. And then very quickly you start to realize, oh, there's something more going on than I was taught in the textbooks. And I do have to say, it's extremely difficult to appreciate that unless you have experienced it personally. So the reason why I say that is, I think a lot of people with type 1 diabetes quite rightly get frustrated with their healthcare professionals, their doctors, or whoever they see, and they're like, they just don't understand. And the reason is they can never understand. Unless you've lived it and you've seen that one day when you do something, the glucose level behaves a certain way, and you think you do exactly the same the next day and it doesn't behave the same way again. If you haven't experienced that on a personal level and it's really annoyed you, it's hard to appreciate it. And you have to understand that the healthcare professionals have been told, this is the theory, it's in the textbook, so this is what's going to happen. And a classic one is, I can even remember doing this as a dietitian. I look back and I just shake my head, but it's just what you're taught. Someone came back with type 1 diabetes and they said, every time I have pizza, I go really high, but I count the carbs right. And I was like, yeah, of course you count the carbs right. And then in my head, I'm thinking, well, you just need to count them a bit more accurately. That's what you need to do. And then obviously they go away and they come back and then they lost trust with me, lost faith because I wasn't listening to them essentially. And I didn't get it until the first time I ate pizza. I had the Domino's pizza. It was just like, what is going on here? It was okay for a bit and then bang, I ended up needing double the insulin that I thought. And I was just like, wow. Yeah, this requires a serious understanding of your own body, not everybody else's body, just your own body. And again, I think that's where, for me, continuous glucose monitoring, although I love insulin pumps and other things, but continuous glucose monitoring for me is the one tool that's completely indispensable if you need to learn what's going to happen to you. You can manage it well with 2 injections a day, probably 1 injection a day. If you really know, if you have a CGM, you can work out what to do, in my opinion. But if you're willing to invest that time. Saying that, quite rightly, other people have more stuff to do in their life than obsess about the fine details of glucose control, and everyone exists on a continuum. Sort of people who just want it in the back of their mind and they've got it and just kind of like enjoy life and leave that bit just as long as they're okay. And there are other people who want 99% in range and, kind of there. And everyone exists in that continuum, and you will change on that continuum depending where your life goes. And I think having a range of tools to adapt to where you fit on that continuum at any point in life. A classic example being pregnancy. As soon as the lady gets pregnant, bang. When you've got to do it for somebody else, you are on it. They are on it, like better than anybody. And then as soon as the pregnancy goes, like, whew, all right, let's get back to how it used to be. I just don't want to obsess about it anymore. So it means they need a different set of tools for pregnancy compared to normal life. And I think having diabetes and having an understanding of that is really important, because then you can employ the tools as needed, but you should be offered the range of tools to teach. And I guess that's what I've tried to put on the website, really, is if you really wanted to go crazy with it, you can do, but also at the same time, you don't have to. You just need to pick out these strategies when they seem to work for you.
Yeah, that leads me into something I'm quite curious about, just from the people I've spoken to, is what maybe your thoughts are on the pace of giving out this kind of information and the layering of it and the timing of it, because as we've said already, it's so individual, it's very far reaching, it's complex, there's emotional aspects and technological aspects, and rightly so, and understandably so. Many people are pretty overwhelmed by various aspects of it. Others who spent years with no information and, fumbling around with the very basics. And then, parents I've spoken to who want every textbook going because, at first, again, understandably, you think you can sort of complete diabetes in terms of the knowledge and then go off and kind of execute that knowledge. So what are your thoughts on the pacing of information and where that lies within the journey, if you like?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes under two themes. So the first is survive. The information you need at the beginning is you got to survive, which is you need insulin to keep the glucose levels under control, enough without going too low, and not too much as well. Sorry, to going too low, and then enough to prevent you going too high. And you also need to know how to manage hypos and how to manage ketone levels. Like, you have to have those three things down. You get those three things down and you understand those, you're going to stay away from critical situations. So that's the survive bit. And for some people, that's all they can handle at the beginning. And that's fine. And as you said, that's just like the basic. You have to have that before you can leave hospital or wherever. And then I guess past that is how to thrive. And that is a very, very long continuum from thriving a bit, thriving a lot, ultimately thriving, kind of everything. How everyone paces through there. Some people never make it past halfway because they don't want to, and that's fine. That's their choice. Some people want to go all the way till the end and they want to do it in 2 weeks, and they never will do, because it has to go hand in hand with experiential learning. So when you learn something, you only really learn if you try it and it sticks and you've had a couple of experiences like, oh, actually, I thought that was going to work, but it didn't. I thought it was going to work, but it didn't. You can't do that in 2 weeks. It's just like you don't have enough experiences to be able to do that. So I think there is some people who will probably try to do everything in the first 2 weeks, get completely overwhelmed and frustrated, who could do with just taking a breath and slowing down and survive first and build up. And there's probably some other people who would benefit from some gentle encouragement or a small kick up the arse to go, well, come on, there is a little bit more that will actually make your life easier. So obviously it's a very individual thing, but I would frame it in survive as an absolute essential. And then the thriving bit comes in stages when you're ready for it, but also when you're having these experiences, just kind of putting notes on, go, I've learned something there. And I think that's, for me, the families that I see who don't necessarily get so overwhelmed with it is they just understand it's a game. Like, the glucose levels are a game. It's not a good or bad. It's just a game that you're trying to improve on. And every experience that you have that doesn't go your way, you might call it a failure or whatever you want to call it, but it's just a temporary learning point that strategy didn't work. That's one we can bin off and we can do something different. And I think people who take that game mentality towards their glucose levels and see it as like an objective thing that's not necessarily a personal like indictment on their ability to manage things are the ones that generally tend to take the learning. So I guess it's kind of like Carol Dweck's fixed mindset versus growth mindset. If you take into it the growth mindset of, everything I learn is brilliant, a little setback, that's fine, I can learn from it. And I think that maybe depends on the community that you roll with and the healthcare professionals that you see can either make that a better or easier experience or can make it significantly worse depending on who you surround yourself with. So I think that's also an important point, is your peer support and your healthcare professional support. Hopefully they've got the kind of growth mindset to work with you to enable that, as opposed to it being very good, bad, your levels are less than this, that's bad control. The language is quite important. It's nothing good or bad. It's just in target or out of target. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, simple enough, but I think certainly, when I've been frustrated by the outcomes I've got, when I think I've quote unquote done everything right, and particularly for parents, this is the child's health. So, what have you seen in terms of some helpful things that have maybe taken that pressure off? That this isn't a fixed equation, and this is all kind of ongoing learning, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, I had, as you alluded to in the start, a real pivotal moment for my learning and supporting families came was when, so I got my son and daughter tested with type 1 diabetes antibodies test on the finger prick test. My daughter's came up negative, which is just a straight no. But my son's then came up with a positive. And I didn't know so much about it at the time. And I was like, oh, wow, this is coming. It's coming in the next 3, 5 months, 10 years, who knows, but it's coming. And then he obviously went for the venous blood draw probably about 4 or 5 weeks afterwards because you have to get it confirmed. I didn't know at the time there's a false positive rate of about 10%. So about 10% of people don't actually, when they test on the blood spot, go positive, don't actually go to negative. But you don't hear that. Or no one told me at the time. I'll tell people now, but even 10% is a low chance. So you have that period from that finger prick to when that result comes in from the blood, you're almost certain it's going to happen tomorrow or the day after. And it just really changed my view of how hard as a parent it was going to be, because I can just remember sitting there at a dinner table and I was watching Jude eat, and I was like, if I would have given the insulin 15 minutes before now, he's not eating that quick enough. And I'd be like having to harass him to eat his food faster. So how would I manage that? Well, maybe I'd give half the insulin up front. And then I would prioritize the protein first, then put a bit of carbs in. Just all of a sudden, the meal has gone from an enjoyable family experience, and I'm obsessing about how I'm going to manage. It's not even happened yet. And then you would have the feedback. So yeah, it kind of really put me into, oh my God, this is going to be ridiculously hard. I'm going to have to be unbelievably easy on myself as a parent to realize that it isn't a game that you can get 100% on, or a score you can get 100% on. You can only do the best that you can do with the resources, the time, and the energy you have your time. So if you're at the moment newly diagnosed, no sleep, stressed out your brains, you've got family illness and all sorts of things going on, you've just got to, you've got to give yourself permission that it's okay not to be in range. And it's also nice to know that you don't have to be 90% in range. The evidence will suggest, if you think about CGM values, that anywhere north of 60, 65% in range, the incremental benefits you get in your future health from there upwards diminish. So people who are kind of obsessing over, like me, getting from 90 to 99% in range, you're doing so little benefit for your health for all the time you have to put in. So I think those kind of messages of, look, what's the bare minimum you can do that you can manage, and where will it get you? And then from there, if you want to squeeze another 5%, we'll help you squeeze another 5%. But if it's not possible for you, you have to balance these things out over a whole life of priorities and things that come along. So I think it's just giving permission that it doesn't have to be perfect, giving permission that it's going to change over time, and that you'll learn. You'll learn along the way, and there'll be certain things that come along. So yeah, I think it's just having that level of kindness towards yourself. And some people are better than this than others. I'm particularly not very good with myself, if I'm totally honest. But I would think I would have to be push myself to have to be. Otherwise, it could become all consuming. I'm sure there's so many parents out there who, sit there and think, I'm not doing a good enough job. You are doing a good job. If you're giving your loved one love, is first of all they need before blood sugar management. They don't need being told off about high blood sugars and stuff like that. They just need your support. They need your love. And you also need to give yourself some love as well.
Yeah, nice. So then, we sort of touched on the art meets science, if you like, and I think I'm probably more in tune with the art side. I'm obviously doing my thing with the tech, and absolutely, have benefited from the technology. But enter the glucose never lies in this way. So, can you briefly explain in your terms, in your words, what people can find on the glucose never lies, what it's for, what it can
Yeah.
offer?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it started basically when my son tested with positive antibodies. I'd already been a diabetes pediatric specialist dietitian for 10 years or so. I worked in industry for one of the insulin pump companies. I'd done research and whatever. And then I realized, I sat down, I was like, okay, well, I best get on board and teach my mum, my mother-in-law, my wife, friends and family, how am I going to do it? I was just like, I can't give them this booklet that we've got at work. I just can't give it them because it's not good enough. It's just not good enough. It's not interactive. It's not live. It's not easy to access. It's not, pictures aren't good enough. Like, I just can't do it with this stuff that I've got in front of me. So I was like, okay. I'd fortunately messed around with making a few websites before, and one of my good friends, one of my best mates, the best man at my wedding, he's a sort of web developer. I was like, okay, give me the 101 on what I need to do. So he was kind and set up a WordPress account, set up all the back end for it. It's like, this is how you make a page. Just put some pages out there. So that's how it started. And it was just me trying to offer it in two forms. So usually the first part of every section or post is this is just what you need to know and what you can consider to do. Importantly, always check with your diabetes team. Don't follow it straight off there. I don't know you. I don't know your situation. I don't have skin in your game. So it's always important to say that. But in general, the 101 of what things mean in understandable, relatable terms. And most importantly, what are the 20% of things that are going to get you 80% of the benefits straight off the bat? And then the second part of each section is, okay, if you got that and you're still here and you want to go into the weeds, I can take you into the weeds because that's where I live. So it's kind of like nerding out on the physiology, the nutrition, the psychology, what the evidence says, what the evidence doesn't say, critiquing some of the things. So if you kind of, that floats your boat, there's kind of like the second part of each section is usually layered with loads of nerdy stuff. But as I've kind of put on the website, Danny is my wife, is like, okay, Danny, you can stop here now. You do not need to go any further. It's only going to fry your brain. Absolutely no need for it. You've got all you need just here. So try to set it up like that. So there's an initial foundation sections, which is what is diabetes, how to treat lows, basically all your survive stuff, what it is, highs, lows, etc. Then carbohydrate counting, exercise management on a basic level, what CGM is, and then kind of a little bit about the pump. So that's the foundation section. So most people, if you went and did that, it wouldn't take you that long. You'd have the survive bit and quite a bit of the thriving down. You'd have the 20% of things which would cover you. And then I guess post that is, okay, if you want to go a bit further, then we've got a mealtime guide, which tells you how to do pizzas, tells you how to do high carb meals, how to get flat lines in your glucose levels if you want to go down those routes. I'm heavily involved with exercise guidelines, been involved in a couple of the big international ones. So it's kind of like, okay, if you want to go past just, have a little bit of carbs before exercise and reduce your insulin a bit, then just kind of like, if you want to get into the specific type of exercises and really nerd out, you can get into that. And I guess more recently, obviously as technology is advancing, we've got a whole host of different continuous glucose monitors, and automated insulin delivery systems or hybrid closed loops. So, kind of what are they? What do they do? What's the differences between them? But again, that's set out really simply. So there's 4 different systems, and rather than being all these complex things, I just give them a superhero name. So if you want a T-Slim, it's, like Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. If you want something which is going to smash your after meal highs, it's the Hulk. If you want something which has got all the tools, but you're going to have to use them, it's a Cam APS. If you want something that's sleek and sexy and really easy to use and low profile, it's normally Pod 5. So, kind of trying to give something some personalities like that. So rather than it just being a piece of tech, you kind of get what it means. So we cover a bit of tech stuff. And then, just started a podcast, which is nice to be on this one. And that is a bit of a mixture, actually. So it ranges from absolute geeking out with professors in the space on continuous glucose monitoring accuracy to a level that nobody needs to know bar me, but I think it's still fun to do.
There are people out there that appreciate that.
100%, 100%. And then, but also we've just started a bit of a series of beyond the numbers. So, for example, people who've created communities because they didn't have one themselves. Like they started off with 3 people, and now they've got like 40 people, 50 people coming to brunch. And then there's one lady from South Africa who thought people should have access to continuous glucose monitoring. Has got a petition with 20,000 people, and she's about to head off to South Africa government with it. Amazing. And then Gavin Griffiths is coming on. I think he's been on your podcast as well. Yeah. And, he started with, just like running, and now he's got a league of diabetes, thing where there's people all over the world who are kind of creating their own communities based off what he's done. So there's kind of stuff there from the absolute geeky stuff to what it really means to create a community and connect with people outside of your hospital with diabetes. So I guess there's a fair bit of range of stuff on there for people depending on what you'd want to access. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour. Does that sound fair to what's on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something for everyone, for sure, no matter where you're at in this kind of wild experience, like the washing machine of type 1 diabetes, as I sometimes call it. Yeah, for sure. And, as talking about the weeds, I was literally trying to figure out how this pump functioned. So I was in that when I stumbled across you. But the amount of pages I bookmarked for different times when I need to be in the weeds, and we'll come back onto movement, because I think that's something that is so intimidating for so many people, just from the conversations I've had online, to these, these little hacks and tricks. And like you state, this resource is clear, actionable, and easy to come back to. And that exactly is what it feels like for me. And we were talking a bit before we came on air about podcasts in particular, and how they're a very passive way to absorb information if you don't want to ask questions to anyone, your healthcare providers or otherwise, and you don't have to put a presence online. And I kind of like that idea that someone is just kind of chipping away a little bit with us in their ears. So yeah, hello to you if that's you today. So with that in mind, then, this like catalogue of information, very snackable, very digestible, and verified as well, which is the bit that I always come back to, with this like absolute world of online information now. Given how much stuff there is out there these days, verified and otherwise, and there are charities, there are healthcare providers, there are diabetes companies, all doing their best, in my mind, to help people. Why do you think that something like this does not exist or did not exist elsewhere in this kind of
I think it probably does in certain aspects. I think it's just whatever meets you in your journey along that time. So I guess I'm either fortunate or unfortunate to wear four hats in this space is probably what makes the glucose levels lie slightly different in some ways, is that I have type 1 myself. So obviously there's that personal element. Although my son went on to test negative for antibodies, I had a window into 8 weeks of what life was going to be like as a parent. Now, it's not the same thing as living with a parent, but it scared the bejesus out of me and made me think, wow, there needs to be something a bit better than there currently is. So I have that hat, and I obviously work with children, young people, so I kind of understand that dynamic. I'm a researcher, obviously, within the space as well, especially around exercise. So I kind of have I guess if you was to ask some of the groups that I sit on, they either really like or really dislike me for one particular reason within those groups. Is I always keep bringing it back to, this is interesting, but what kind of impact is this going to have for people who live with the condition? What is the point in doing this piece of research, which is going to give you a small advance in some area that no one is ever going to use? How about we do something that is actually relatable and manageable? So with having a bit of an access into understanding of research, that's quite helpful. And I guess more recently, because I've had the opportunity to present at some international conferences, I'm sort of in with the in crowd as well. So it means that I can just get one of the leading professors in the world to come and talk about GLP-1s and type 1 diabetes. We had Virel Shah on, who is like the person. He's done the main trials for semaglutide and Mounjaro with type 1 diabetes in adults. So I was like, can I get you on a podcast? He was like, yeah, no problems. And he's just, because I know them to a degree, it's an open and honest and easy conversation. I'm fairly relaxed. I was like, if you're going to come on my podcast, it's going to have to be a laugh. Like, it just can't be stiff and boring. You have to show your human side. And I think for researchers, that's amazing as well, because all you see is this very well articulated academic piece. And often what they really want to say is not in there because they can't, sometimes, well, they're not allowed to within the academic kind of put their personal opinion. It has to be backed up with everything, which in some ways from the scientific literature is completely right. However, if you're a person with type 1 diabetes, you want the context. If, for example, GLP-1s and type 1 diabetes are not on license yet. However, it's being used all over the place. So what's the best answer? Oh, it's not licensed for you. Or is it, it's not licensed, but if you're going to do it, this is what you'd consider doing. So it's nice to be able to reach out to those people and just kind of go, this is a really important topic. you can come on and say what you really think. What do you reckon? And if you don't want to say it, I'll kind of say it for you. You can just nod. And at least that way, then it makes it easier for them to kind of like go, oh, I can't disagree with you there, John. But obviously, that's not what the research says. It's letting anybody know.
I didn't say it. Yeah.
It's letting anybody know who's listening that the person who is leading in that area, that's what they really think. That's where the science may catch up to. But then also it's buyer beware. We try to be open and honest and sort of say, look, some of this stuff there's evidence for and some there isn't, just like with everything in life. This is not advice on what to do. It's some information for you to consider in your own personal circumstances, discuss with your diabetes team, discuss with your trusted people, and then make a sort of decision based on what you think is your risk profile. So, yeah, I guess maybe in some ways that's the advantage that I've got, but it also means my life is consumed with diabetes. Literally from morning to night, I do nothing but diabetes and blood sugars and find out information. It's a good job. I like it. But so yeah, I guess that's probably, it may have something different, but that's not also to say that there aren't some amazing things out there that just speak to people. So some people don't want all that. They just would like, do you know what? You look like me, you sound like me, you do the same things that I do. There's loads of people who do like exercise and things. They've got their own things. Then great. If that's what floats your boat, then, go and find that. It's got to be something that you connect with.
That's it. Yeah. I think relatability and connection is a huge part of it, isn't it? You can see yourself in someone or in a piece of information or whatever it may be. Then
where I work, Angie, she actually sort of works with me on the Glucose Never Lies. She does the social media stuff because I just can't do it. It's not I can't do it. I just can't do it. Can't do it. But she.
What you mean among these 4 hats, 2 children, and an education platform? You just don't have time.
I haven't got the patience for it. But she's a lady from Indian heritage, and you would think, just from what we said, if people come to Birmingham Children's, they'd want to speak to me as a dietitian because I'm the man. The reality is, if people rock up and they're from a South Asian background, they won't listen to me. They don't connect with me. They don't look the same as me. They don't often have the same culture as me. So I'm trying to ask them questions and try and not make assumptions, but within that, it's really clumsy. Whereas obviously, Anjani is generally in those certain circumstances, understands the culture, understand what different foods means. The conversation just flows and it's simple and it's easy. Therefore, the connection that they build will lead to a much better therapeutic relationship and consideration. So I think it's also, whatever resonates with you, and that's what you should embrace, as long as you're doing your due diligence and just kind of going like, what to kind of saying there's not a great deal behind that. It's always worth having a little critical eye in terms of what information's being put out there. But if it passes up to the sniff test, then it's generally going to be pretty reasonable to at least experiment with.
Yeah, and I think that curiosity will take you places when it comes to your health. We do have to tune inwards, but there's only so much that you can do alone, right? And you sort of alluded to that as well, that you need the professional team, you need the support networks as well. This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Dexcom. Using Dexcom CGM has given me so much confidence to make informed diabetes treatment decisions in the moment. You can choose to wear it on your arm or your abdomen, which is so great to give those sites a break. And all Dexcom CGMs have the share and follow feature, even when connected to an insulin pump. So your family and friends can see your glucose levels and get alerts, giving that extra bit of support when needed. Head to Dexcom.com to request your free Dexcom ONE+ sample. Always read the user manual for important product aspect and limitations. Talk to your doctor for diabetes management terms and conditions and terms of use. What about the research at the moment? Like, what have you come across in the research lately that has kind of excited you or intrigued you or led you down a path of curiosity?
Gosh. Okay, so there's 3 things. I'll say them up front so I don't forget them. One, which I'm really interested in, is the power of activity and movement, which for me is the most underutilized glucose management tool. The second one is going to be about continuous glucose monitoring in terms of the systems available and some of the good, the bad, and the ugly about that. And then the third one will be about these sort of hybrid closed loop systems and automated insulin delivery systems. Although they are amazing for the vast majority of people, there's a lot of people they won't actually suit, and some tips and tricks around to think of that. So I'll just put those 3 things down so I don't forget.
Ooh, interesting topics. Yeah.
So activity. It takes me back to Christmas Day 2018. I'd had the full Christmas meal and whatever, and I just couldn't put enough insulin in. I mean, I was just going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. It doesn't matter what I was putting in. And then eventually I'd put so much in that I came crashing down and just then had like the worst Christmas day. I spent the whole day high and then the whole night low. And I was like, okay, I've been diagnosed for 10 years and I know a lot. This can't be right. And there must be something different to this. And I came across a piece of research from Mike Riddell, who, if anyone knows type 1 diabetes and exercise, there's a few people who are the man or the woman, and he's the man in this case, or certainly was at that time. And he'd done a piece of research on about 120 children and people, and basically looked at what happened to their glucose levels if they did activity in the 4 hours after eating. And lo and behold, about half of them went low. So the title of the paper was, and the higher they went, the faster they came down, or the further they came down. So the title of the paper was, the higher they start, the faster they fall, which when you read it was like, oh, wow, this is really kind of a dangerous thing to do. You have to be super careful. But then I looked at this sub-analysis, and it basically showed all the people who started with a glucose level above 10, and they generally did this activity about 2 hours after eating. And within 40 minutes of activity, every single one of them were back down into target, every single one, and only a few lows. And I was like, hang on a minute. That looks like the best hyperglycemia management tool that I've ever seen. There's no way insulin is bringing the glucose level down at 30, 40 minutes. No way. So from there, I just started experimenting myself, and I was like, this just doesn't work like a bit. It works almost every time. As long as I've given insulin within 4 hours, if I drift above 10, then I'm on it, just like 20-minute walk, and bang, it brings it down. So then I got obsessive and I was like, if it goes over 8, then I'll do it. And then that just became unmanageable. So I had to find a level which was about right for me. And I was like, right, okay, if this works for me, then we need to get this out. So we started teaching it where I worked at the Children's Hospital, and we coined it as part of a 3-part series of how to manage your glucose levels in Target, game, set, match. And this was the game part of it. It was, when you go high and it hits your high level, whatever you set it at, you've got 2 choices. It's either correction of insulin or you move your backside for 20 minutes to bring it down, with a simple idea of 20 minutes of activity should drop the glucose level by about 2 directionally. Usually most people can do a takeaway 2. It's not that hard from a sum's perspective. So we started teaching that, and we found that about a third of the people loved it and got much more target range. A third of the people used it somewhat, and a third of people just rolled their eyes at you and went, I ain't doing that, which again speaks to, that's 30% of people who would have never been taught this strategy, who've got a wicked tool to use. 30% of people dipping in and out, 30% not useful for them. But you couldn't predict who those 30% were going to be. So you had to teach it to everyone and say, it's a tool, you go for it. Yeah. So I remember from that then taking this, I've presented this at a conference, and then comes the inevitable question, the one that really kind of, I don't know if it annoys me, but it kind of like, it just makes you think, oh, I've got more work to do. And I just say, I don't have more work to do. It's kind of, you present it like this, this is a tool you can use. And the hands come and say, well, this study you did there is on like 100 people in Birmingham Children's Hospital, and you didn't really measure the types of activity and what it was like over different people and different types of exercise and all this stuff. So I'm not sure we can really use this out, push it out further and wider. Okay, then. If that's the case, I'll take your challenge, and I'm going to contact the lead author of this big data set in America called the Type 1 DEXI data set, which essentially is tracked over 500 adults and 300 children. And they had a huge data set, like 25,000 exercise events or something stupid like that. So I contacted the author, and I actually contacted 2 research teams at the same time, thinking that maybe one of them would bite or maybe none. So I went for the approach of 2, and I contacted the first team and said, look, I've got this idea. We've shown it's worked locally. What I want you to do, if you can do, is isolate all the events where the activity started above 10, activity events between 10 and 60 minutes, and see what happens to the glucose level. So bordering on harassment, after about the 10th email, the guy was like, all right, if you're willing to do the work, I'll get the data for you. I was like, okay, perfect. So that happened, and they were very gracious. I mean, sent some crazy emails to those people, but that's what you got to do. And we basically showed that roughly about 20 minutes of activity will drop you by 2, there directionally, and 40 minutes will drop you about 4 or 5. So I was like, boom, we've got this sold up now. So next conference presented this. Okay, brilliant. So now we can go out teaching it, right? There's still one problem, John. Oh, what's that? Well, what you're talking about is they're above target and they come back down. You don't have a control arm. They may have just come down without doing the activity, so you can't say it's due to the activity, can you? Okay, but as fortune for me, the research team who I'd contacted the second time had a wicked data scientist. So I went back to her and she was like thinking about the ideas like, oh, what we really need is a control arm, but how are we going to do that? It's like, that's what AI is for. I can go into each individual person of those 1,500 events, isolate the same glucose level, the same trend arrow, the same insulin on board. So you're going to have a matched control, and then we'll see what happens. I was like, okay, if we can do this, this will sew it up. So anyway, we did the analysis and we've just published it about a week or so ago. And there's a commentary article just sort of chatting the history of this. But it basically shows when you're above 10, 20 minutes will drop you by 2, or if you're in milligrams per deciliter, 40 milligrams per deciliter. And importantly, if you did nothing, it would drop you by 0.2 or 5 milligrams per deciliter.
Wow.
So it does actually, that is the actual truth. So that's like a 6-year journey to take what I knew worked back in 2018 is now going to get taught, hopefully far and wide, as an alternative strategy between meals to get your glucose back in target and improve timing range. So that is hopefully, if anyone's listening to this, really try it. If your glucose level goes above 10 sort of after a meal, 20 minutes of walking would generally drop you by 2. And it's a good place to start. Will it work by 2? Of course it won't. It'll work somewhere between 1 and 5. But you'll get an idea. You won't go low, and you'll be able to get an idea of how you can use this if you so want to. So that's what I would say excites me is exercise to me brings on the image in my mind of someone in a leotard getting fit, kind of, it's a very exclusive club. Yeah. I'm talking like walking for 20 minutes, which anybody can do. Well, most people can do. And if you're not, I remember one girl who was on a diabetes thing where she was like, well, I'm in a wheelchair, I can't do that. So you can move your arms, can't you? She's like, yes, same thing. So she actually went and did sort of these arm weight things, and she messaged right going, it worked. Yeah, it's going to work. It's like the best way I can describe it, it supercharges the insulin that's around. So the insulin that's there, it just needs a kick up the arse, and that activity just boom makes it work super strong. It's a bit like spinach for Popeye, essentially, is kind of the way that I think of it.
I love it so much because, like, anecdotally, I've got a friend, she's working at the desk all day, she's quite stressed in the afternoon, and her post-lunch highs are just so stubborn. The second she gets up to move for the train, bam, and has a hypo on that train every single time. And myself as well, I see it and I just need to get around the block, and it might not move initially, but I know eventually it's going to start going. Like you say, I love that is about walking, because I think approaching exercise with type 1 is
within those 1,500 events, there was walking, there was gardening, there was everything in there. And I love that because people always go, oh, what about if people don't want to walk? What happens if you do cycling? Yeah, we covered that in the data. Oh, what about if they did gardening? Yeah, we covered that in the data. Oh, yeah, we covered that in the data too. So it doesn't matter, whatever you do, if you've got insulin on board, you're going to drop. And I think that probably comes to my second point with activity is insulin on board is king. When it comes to your risk of going low during exercise, how much insulin is in your system from the bolus before generally will determine your risk of going low. Not are you doing aerobic exercise, not are you doing resistance exercise, none of this stuff. Insulin on board is king. And this comes to a very tricky point of the difference between what's programmed into a pump and what's reality. So the reality of insulin on board, let's take 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You give 10 units. 2 hours after, about 50% of that has gone. So you've got 5 units still left after 2 hours. The remaining 5 units drifts off over the next 4 hours. It lasts 6 hours. It peaks at 2, half works, lasts up to 6 hours. But because of the way insulin pumps work, and they unfortunately count both food and insulin, correction insulin together as insulin on board, the pumps then think, all that insulin that I've calculated on board is going to drop my glucose level, forgetting that if you've just given 10 units for food, 2 units for a correction, well, the 10 units for the food is for the food that's in your belly. That's not going to make your glucose level drop. So really, you've only got 2 units on board as such. So you end up having to put a really short active insulin time to allow the pumps to correct aggressively enough. But that becomes a problem when you go to do exercise, because then if you've set your active insulin time down at 2 hours or 2.5 hours to get better control, you'll look at your display on your pump and you'll go, there's no insulin on board, but you had 10 units 3 hours ago. You better believe you're going to go low. You better believe you're going to go low. So it's a really tricky one. So I guess it's one of those things in my mind. My simple thing is, have I eaten and given insulin in the last 3 hours? If so, the risk is going to be pretty high. If it's more than 3 hours, the risk is going to be fairly low. So that would be my second thing, is 20 minutes will drop you by 2. When you're thinking about your risk of hypoglycemia, if you've eaten and given insulin in the 3 hours before, you're going to need more carbs than you presume, and your risk is going to be low. If it's more than 3 hours since you've given it, the risk is definitely lower and you'll need less carbs. That's something that will help people understand, why is it when I do exercise first thing in the morning, I never go low? Well, if you haven't given insulin like as a bolus for breakfast, you're going to have very low insulin on board. Why is it when I do my exercise at 10 o'clock in the morning after I have breakfast at 7, I go low? Well, you've still got a lot of insulin on board from breakfast, even though your pump is saying no, you haven't. So it's understanding the actual thing versus what the visual representation you're given as a person with diabetes are often two very different things. And having those bits and nuggets of understanding start to make why the glucose behaves in certain ways a lot more understandable than if you go back to, unfortunately, most of your healthcare team and they'll go, why are you going to know your risk? Well, check your insulin on board. It's like, well, it's set at 2 hours. It's not going to give you any inclination when you're doing exercise at 2.5 hours. So that's not an ideal piece of advice, but it's what you're taught. So it's not their fault. It's just, that's why it's important to understand the background basics of how things work. It makes the glucose behavior a lot more understandable.
Okay, so in like the space of 4 minutes, you've taught me more than anyone has in 30 years when it comes to type 1 diabetes and exercise. So yeah, I hope the listeners can understand how it, like, you know, why I so wanted to get you on, and like the knowledge you have in your head is absolutely phenomenal. So talk to me then about hybrid closed loops.
Well, let me do CGM first, because then I'll finish on a positive. Yeah, let me do CGM. Okay. So CGM is kind of like my, it's something I'm just lost in the weeds in it so far at the minute. I am drowning in it, but at the same time loving it. But the thing that really caught my attention was when we started this program at Children's Hospital in 2019, we obviously wanted to evaluate the systems on the market to see which was the best for the people we were supporting. I obviously knew about Dexcom and Libra and Medtronic. I wanted to know what else was out there, because why wouldn't you? So we invited the manufacturers in to have a look. And it was to get market authorization in the UK and Europe, you need something called CE marking. Now, at the time, I was of the belief that if you have CE marking, you must have robust clinical data to show that this system has been tested, and effectively, if you're going to have an indication for children for insulin dosing, you'd want to have some data on children for insulin dosing. So, of the 10 manufacturers we invited in to have a look, 3 of them had data on children and people from the age of 2. And the other 5 had no data, or no data they would pass to us. The only data they had was on adults with type 2 diabetes mainly. So I asked the question, I was like, so how do you know how this is going to perform for the children that we look after then, if all you've got data is on people with type 2 and not taking insulin? And to their answer was, well, we've got CE marking. I was like, that wasn't the question. The question was, do you have any data to let me know that that's the case? And, I think we must have some on file. Well, can I see it then? No, it's proprietary information. Well, how's it proprietary information if all you're telling me is whether it's been tested on children or not? And so that started me off on a what's been a 6-year tirade of understanding CE marking, blah, blah, going on. And the basic summary of this is, unfortunately, at the moment, you can't be sure that a product with CE marking, with indications for insulin dosing for children or adults, that they have data to back that up. That is not to say that every product with CE marking doesn't have that, but you need to look into the data. And I've done a piece of work with the Diabetes Specialist Nurse Forum. So if you go onto their website and look for the CGM comparison chart, it lays out to you every single CGM device that's available, what indications it has for age and insulin dosing, what the data shows that they have on those populations. And from there, you can work out in 15 seconds which devices you understand the risk for. And when I say this is, it doesn't mean that the devices that don't have data are unsafe. It means we don't know the risk. That's 2 different things. But when it comes to insulin dosing for children from the age of 2, which may have been on my son, I'm not in the business of taking those type of risks on my children or anyone else's children or any adult for that matter. So I think when it comes to things like that, it can seem so daunting, and it is. We've tried to simplify it into one grid and goes, have a look down. If you've got a score of 4 or more out of 5 on the study, that's fine to use. you can have a look. If it doesn't have a score of 4, you're in the realms of unknown risk. If you want to take that risk, knock yourself out. If you don't want to take that risk, these are the ones that you want to consider. And it's just straightforward as that. So, but I think that's really important because marketing and clinical data are two very different things. And the problem with having a CE marking, it gives you a market authorization, which kind of means you can say, we're authorized to sell this, come into your office and sell it, which I just think is bonkers. But there we go. So that's the CGM piece.
Let's see if we can grab that to put it in the episode description, if that's going to be helpful for people.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great. Okay. So touching on hybrid closed loops then, as they become more available, you mentioned there's sort of a suitability factor. Not all pumps are built the same, and certainly not all individuals are built the same, far from it. So what in your mind are the differentiators, and alluding to this research that you've mentioned that you're seeing now?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing to say is there'll never be, I don't think there will be, a bigger paradigm shift of improvement of glucose levels than going from standard pump therapy or injections with CGM to these hybrid closed loops. The main reason being is that they respond to the glucose level. If your glucose level starts to rise, they put more insulin in to get you down to a target level. Let's just say 6, for example. It's going above 6, it's going to put more insulin to get you to 6. If you're going below 6, it's going to stop the insulin, so it's going to try and keep you at 6. So where that works amazingly is overnight, because you don't eat, you don't move, and as long as the CGM's reading fairly accurately, you are golden. You're waking up every morning at a level close to 6. Life is good. You've had a good night's sleep. You haven't had the alarm beeping off where your partner's elbowing you going, you're beeping again, and then you get up and you've had a hypo and your adrenaline's going, you can't get back to sleep. Like, there'll be nothing better than that. I mean, the amount of parents that come in and just go, I've got a first night's sleep in 5 years. Thank you. And it's just to hear that is just amazing. So
yeah, I think even explaining that part, like, there was a time where that to me would have been unthinkable, like absolutely inconceivable. So yeah, as a starting point, that's
absolutely amazing. On average, they've taken timing ranges from about 45 to 50% to north of 60 to 65, close to 70, something like that. So it's an absolute game changer for the vast majority of people with diabetes. So with all that great and amazing stuff, it's probably going to be suitable and the best thing for probably 90% of people with diabetes, I would say. And then you've got your choices between the systems. As we said before, if you want a little bit more control over the basal rate and the correction factor and how the system is behaving, a control IQ will suit you. If you want something which is just plug and play and really aggressive on the glucose levels, then you look at something like a Medtronic 780G. If you want something that's got the range of tools that you can kind of get quite nerdy with managing different meals and bits and pieces, the CAM APS will be a really good system. It's very sophisticated and also will be good in general as well. And it's probably got the widest range of indications. And then, if you don't want a tube and you want something that's kind of plug and play and like low profile, then the Omnipod 5 is probably a good thing for you. But there's 4 good systems that are very reputable and got great data available in the NHS. There is one other system, I'm not going to mention it because I'm not even want to call things out, but that's also available in the NHS from children of the age of 2 with no publicly available clinical data, which I've jumped up and down about, contacted the MHRA about and said, yes, it's just not okay. And actually the professional societies, I think, have still got statements out to say they do not recommend it at all until we see further clinical data. Important note, I'm not saying it is unsafe. I'm saying we don't know the risk. And again, I'm not in the business of taking that kind of risk with people's lives. So just something to be mindful of there. But those 4 systems, just kind of, they all do an amazing job. Whatever floats your boat, you should go for those. But there are a subset of people, I am one of these people, who, if you spent a lot of time managing your diabetes and you know how your body and your glucose level behaves with pump therapy or injections, you'll know you'll have plans for activity and exercise. So I'll give you an example from me. I cycle to work and back every day. I know every morning 20 grams of carbs will get me from home to work every day. Perfect. And the way back home in the mid-afternoon, it requires less. It requires 15 grams, and like clockwork. And that's because my background insulin level was stable. Had the same basal rate every day, didn't change. As soon as I've tried all the different systems, every time I woke up in the morning, the system's either been putting more insulin in to keep me at 6 or less insulin. So I would get on the bike every day with an unknown amount of insulin on board, which meant that my usual 20 grams never worked the same from day to day. It took me about a week and I was like, I can't do this. I just can't do it anymore because in the afternoon, I would the same again. If I'd gone a little bit higher after lunch, you'd have a lot more insulin than expected. If I'd gone low after lunch, I'd have a lot less insulin than expected. I just could not get any stability whatsoever. So I think people who are extremely active and have worked out ways of managing their diabetes based on consistent levels of insulin, they find that bit so difficult to do. And I think if I was to go back now, I would maybe consider it again on the premise of two things. The one is, an hour and a half to 2 hours before you start the activity, go back to normal pump mode, which is a set basal rate. Therefore, the insulin conditions are stable. Therefore, your glucose behavior will be much more stable. As soon as you finish the exercise, flick the loop back on. That would probably get rid of most of the problems. But I guess also another challenge that comes with hybrid closed loops that people will in diabetes have never seen before and happening again is, I'll give you breakfast as a good example. Breakfast spike is a real pain in the ass. Nobody likes a breakfast spike. It's really difficult because you're most resistant in the morning. The general types of foods we eat are mainly carbs. There's a lot of reasons why it's difficult. But people find a way on injections or pump therapy to do it. And that's because running into breakfast time, their background insulin is always stable. And it means that they've got plenty of insulin in the blood vessel that connects your belly or your intestines to your liver. And the key part of that is when you eat foods in the morning or at any point, go into your belly, get digested, go into that blood vessel called the portal vein, and then through the liver, then out. If you've got very little insulin in your portal vein, you miss the opportunity to store a lot of that glucose in the liver before it goes out wild. And that's why people without diabetes have a pancreas sat right over the portal vein. And as soon as the glucose goes up, boom, it puts loads of insulin in there. So obviously that doesn't happen for people with type 1. But where this comes to a point with the hybrid closed loops is, if your pump is suspended for 2 hours before you get up, you have got a grand total of very little insulin in your portal vein. So you better believe on that morning you're having a spike. But the next day, if you've been over-delivering an insulin going in, you're fine that morning. And we just see it all the time. The parents are coming in, they're going, I don't understand. It's the same breakfast. It's the same day. And they've got a massive spike one day, and then it's fine the next. What is going on? I was like, well, you've just got to take the rough with the smooth. You get this full night's sleep. It's not possible. It is possible. There are some tips and tricks actually that you can do to make sure that the insulin is given 2 hours before you get up by having a higher target at certain nights and periods in the night, and then a lower target 2 or 3 hours before you get up. You can do things like that. But these are the type of things that are occurring that you would have never seen on standard pump therapy or injections. So they're just a new problem. But that is on taking it back to the paradigm shift is real. It's amazing. But there are a subset of people who will come across these challenges. And the final challenge from there that people may or may not have considered before is, I've actually got a podcast series coming up on partying with type 1 diabetes, going on alcohol, drugs, partying, etc.
Brilliant, yeah.
Obviously, the risk when you go out drinking alcohol is that you're going to go low later on. And that's because the alcohol stops your liver producing glucose, basically. And you can determine that by the number of units drunk, basically 1 unit per hour. So if you're going to have a full bottle of wine, 10 units, that's 10 hours your liver is not producing enough glucose. So before, what people used to do was chip muffin on the way home, plenty of carbs as you go, keep the glucose level up high, don't worry about it, just sort out in the morning. That's bang on the right advice. But you do that with one of these systems, and you push the glucose level to 15, it's going to start shriveling the insulin in. And just at the time when you don't want it, when you go to sleep, and if you have a chip muffin, even without insulin, you might go high, but you're going to come down at a rate of knots, and you're going to struggle to manage it. So obviously they've got things like activity mode that you can put on, which relaxes the algorithm. But if all else fails and you're having problems, just go back to manual mode. Turn the loop off before you go out getting smashed. Drop the basal rate down. Go out and get smashed and have your chip muffin, and then you'll be fine. You might wake up high, but who cares? You're safe. And then flick the loop back on in the morning, unless you've had a massive session and you've had 30 units of alcohol, and then you have to be careful for the next day. But generally, like if you're unsure what's going to happen and you've had some negative experiences with these hybrid closed loops because they're always shoveling insulin when you go high, the initial part of drinking, especially drinking beer and cider, you're going to be in a lot of problems later on. You can always just go back to the old way of doing it. Just go back to open loop mode. Get smashed, have your chip muffin, wake up in the morning, stick it back on, you'll be fine. So I think these are things that are emerging as the new diabetes education. Before, it was kind of all about different stuff. It was about how can you make it more variable to manage these situations? And now, like, how can we get it back more stable so we don't have all these other situations? So it's just understanding what these systems are doing. But most importantly, from a practical standpoint, is what does it mean and what are my options? And I think that's really the diabetes education, certainly for children and people. Most children and people will be on in the next couple of years. Adults, what may be anywhere between 20 to 50% of adults will be on in the next 5 to 6 years. So it's going to be something that keeps cropping up. So if you're ahead of the curve and you know what to expect, at least you've got some potential strategies to manage it. Bearing in mind, check with your healthcare professional. Don't believe what John says. You kind of always treat it with a thing. I don't want people
caveats there, guys.
But yeah. The problem is sometimes people will hear something like, "Oh, that's the thing I've got to do," but I don't know a person's individual circumstances. To really give personalized advice, you'd need to know what their hypo risk is. You would need to know what their tolerance is for various things. But as a general rule, to understand what's going on, you can kind of directionally get yourself in the arena to ask better questions.
Yeah. And would you say that's kind of a key in terms of these tools being, there's sort of 4 you've mentioned that are available in the UK at least. And, that differs by region and hospital and trust. But then going from this kind of broad approach to kind of drilling down into your individual needs, being able to ask the right questions is an important key in getting from that sort of surviving to thriving, as you mentioned at the top.
Yeah, and I think that's as with anything, you're going to meet a range of people on your way, I'm sure, within your profession. You kind of, there's people who are highly skilled and people who are maybe not as highly skilled, and there's people who you resonate with and people you don't resonate with. And if like me with my diabetes team, I think I might have seen them once in the last 4 years, so I mean it's been slightly different for me, but I know there's a lot of people who are doing well with their diabetes management who just kind of get left alone. They might be doing well from a numbers perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean their quality of life isn't completely smashed because all they're doing is preventing hypos all day. So I think the first thing is, if you're with someone with diabetes and you need some support and help, you're only going to receive that information with someone who you trust and have a relationship with. And you'll have people within your diabetes team, I'm sure, that you kind of get that with. So that's probably the first and foremost important thing. And you can always tell if someone actually asks. I mean, the first thing I was trying to ask if I'm a consultation is, okay, these are the things that I kind of need to cover in this consultation, but what do you want to talk about? What's going on with you? Tell me what is your kind of, if you can walk away from here with 2 things, what are they? And I'll try and make sure we hit those. And I guess that's like an invitation to say, tell me what's going on. And it might be outside of diabetes, in which case it's fine as well. Like, there's loads of times I had a consultation, like, okay, today we need to talk about this, and they'd be like, I just broke up with my boyfriend. And I'm like, okay, diabetes goes to the side. Let's kind of get on to what's most important with you. Because if you don't get past what is most important to someone, then you're going to struggle to, well, there's no point in talking about diabetes in the first place because it's like not most important. There's actually, you have to give a shout out to a person who'd be great to have on your podcast, Kath Barnard Kelly. She's a psychologist who, she's a professor in psychology. And her thing has always been, you need to kind of like, it's a human being. There's a human being who walks into your office. But I would say she's got someone who's got real skin in the game, because not only does she know that, she's now gone entrepreneur to set up her own company to develop something called Spotlight AQ. That is a tool that you can send and message to people before they come in. It's just like a simple wheel. You answer a few questions and it pops up on this wheel, like what's the most important things for them. So before you walk into my office, you'll have filled it out. And you don't have to have that difficult conversation of someone in my family's just died or something like that. You will know, you'll know. Therefore, you can have a proper conversation about what's important. So I think she's doing really good work in that area. It'd be someone would be really interesting to have a chat with about the personal and the emotional side. She's really on forward with that, and that's something within our clinic I'm quite keen for us to try and get in play, is that type of thing where we can send out beforehand, get an idea of what's going on in people's lives. Because the beauty of all the kids being on these systems now is the numbers are kind of sort of taking care of themselves a little bit. So let's talk about what's really going on and see if we can support your overall journey rather than just coming in and going, your HbA1c is this, your timing range is this, or I've seen a few hypos there. Oh, you spiked on that day and you didn't on that day. It's like, it's 70% in range. let's talk about something else.
Zoom out.
Let's talk about something else.
And are you, in your professional kind of connections, are you seeing that clinics and trusts and hospitals are more open to to paying more attention to this kind of stuff that's outside of the number of hypos you've had since I last saw you? That kind of question.
I think it's a really good question. I think the hybrid closed loops offer that opportunity because I can tell you from before CGM came along working in a diabetes team, and then you have his HbA1c with these sporadic finger pricks. You wouldn't know where the insulin doses were. You'd be spending your whole time just obsessing over data to just try and pick out patterns that you'd like. Embarrassing, really, trying to actually figure out what was going on. And the human being never really came into the equation. You just didn't have enough time. You have to cover your numbers because it's your job, but you didn't have time. Well, I think CGM's helped that, but I do think it's hybrid closed loops. Now you've only got maybe one area to look at. Offers the opportunity for people who really want to ask questions, open the door to invite things in other than numbers, but also being ready to say, do you know what? I'm just here to listen. And I can't promise you I can solve your problems. I may be able to point you in the right direction of someone who can do, but at least I can do is listen, and I'll try my best. And I think people appreciate that type of honesty. And inviting people in to have those conversations can obviously change the relationship and make things easier for you. But also, some people are just not comfortable in having those conversations. They've been brought up on a numbers-based game, and that's all they know, and that's what they're going to carry on doing. And I kind of get that, because for anyone to change is quite difficult. But I think if there are tools such as like Spotlight AQ, which can make it easier for healthcare professionals to go, it's a bit more than diabetes here, can just nudge the needle in the right way.
Yeah. And I know you speak from personal experience where you've said kind of you can't separate diabetes from the rest of life and other challenges that you're facing. And, I know there's a whole side that we haven't touched on yet that's kind of driving a lot of the mission of the Glucose Never Lies. And I think it would be remiss of me not to mention that, but equally, I don't want to kind of skirt over it an hour into this episode. But
I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah. So, in 2000, I've had quite a lot of physical injuries. So I broke my collarbone once and I had to have it reset twice, and then broke my ankle and had a problem where the tendon got trapped in the bottom of my foot. So that's just a long way of saying I went from being very physically able to, over a period of time, my activity really, really dropped down. And prior to that, I would be doing literally cycle to work, cycle back, weights 3 times a week. Plus also I'd be doing like 2 hours of hardcore activity a day. I just thought it's because I loved exercise. But anyway, that kind of, along with the challenges of physical injury, that kind of went. And then over a period of time, my mental health was sort of really took was dipping down. But then I remember, it's probably last August, things were kind of like building up, and I've been for operations and all sorts, and things weren't getting better. And the problem I was having to think through my movement. So normally you wouldn't think about getting up out of your chair, just get out of your chair and walk. I was like having to like tense my body to get up and move around, and I couldn't get on my own head about moving. And it got to such a point where I was like worried about moving around. And then I went on a holiday with my family to Spain, and basically I got so anxious about it. And I thought, right, it must be the caffeine I'm drinking, because I always had a really high intake of caffeine as well. So I stopped drinking caffeine. And then by the time I got back home, I just took the biggest nosedive, mental health wise, never saw coming. I just couldn't recover. I was literally struggling to get out of bed, struggling to make it into work. And that carried on for about 6 to 8 months, while seeing loads of people. And all the time within this, I was like, I couldn't move around without thinking about it. The walking was the worst thing for me, because I had this thing trapped in my foot, as well as my shoulder, and my body was like a kilter, and I had to think about every step I move. And it got to a really bad point. I actually had an operation on my foot where they freed the tendon, but nothing improved. So I had this big build up to like, oh, this is going to be it. I'm finally going to be able to get out the other side. And that didn't work. And I was like, oh my God. So then I kind of just went on this total nosedive, to the point where I think in May, I took 6 weeks off work and didn't leave the sofa for about 5 weeks, because I was scared to get up and move, because every time I got up, I would be panicking that for the rest of my life, I'm not going to be able to move around without thinking about it. And it basically got to a point where I was sat in a field ready to finish it because I just couldn't see that things were going to be any different. I wasn't playing with my kids. I was just on the sofa. I was kind of watching episode after episode after episode to distract myself from the fact that I was going to have to think about moving. But then in the back of my mind, knowing that when this film is finished, I'm going to have to think about moving again. And then you don't sleep. And it basically just got to a point where I'd totally given up, close to, apart from the fact of every time I got close to basically taking the final step, that's just a flash of what it would do to my kids. I was convinced, like, for my wife, she would be really upset, but she would find someone else eventually. She'd be able to recover. But I just thought for my kids, they won't be able to recover. So I'm going to have to suffer this, literally suffer it for the rest of my life. But I was just struggling to come to deal with that. And then the psychologist who was seen sort of said, look, I don't know what's going on because you understand how to reframe and do these things, but you just can't do it. Why don't you just go and see it's like neurodivergence, get a neurodivergence assessment? I just thought you're taking the piss, to be honest, more than anything. But I was so desperate, I was like, I'll go. Well, I didn't go. Wasn't walking anywhere. I'll have an online consultation. And basically the lady kind of went through an assessment and said, doesn't sound so much. Tell me about your stimulant use. And then I basically said, well, since the age of 18, I drank the first cup of coffee and never looked back. It was like 1,500 milligrams a day since then with 2 hours of exercise. And he said, did you ever try stop caffeine? I was like, I tried once at the same time as my mate. I felt like absolute crap, but I thought I was going to just on dependency. But like 6-7 weeks after, I still felt like crap. So I'd start taking again, whereas my mate was absolutely fine. She's like, and tell me about when this got worse. It was like, well, stop doing the exercise and stop the caffeine. And she's like, you've got ADHD. I was like, yeah, but I wasn't bouncing off the walls. So I don't know what you mean. So yeah, there's two different types. There's the kind of that type, which is the bouncing off the wall type. And there's another type where you have a lack of dopamine in certain areas of your brain that will prevent you from rumination, but also from a coordination and movement perspective. A lot of your brain is driven by dopamine. If you think of Parkinson's disease and people shaking, that's through a lack of dopamine, so movement control. So she prescribed me, which is basically prescribed speed, slow release speed, amphetamine to regulate dopamine levels. And within the first tablet, I was like, oh, that's different. But I daren't believe it because I'd had so many false starts along the way. I was desperate to believe it, but I couldn't take one more. I was happy just to feel like crap for the rest of my life and not get that inkling of help and just survive it. Then I got that one lift, and that was on a Saturday. I was like, oh. But then things wore off during the day and it was like a bit back to normal. I was like, oh, am I just placebo in it? I don't know. The second day was a bit reproducible, but then the real light bulb came on the third day. I was at work. I'd just gone back to work because I thought if I don't go back to work, I'm never going to get off the sofa. That's all I kept thinking. And I remember I got to work and I sat down. I was like, I didn't think about walking, and I'm sat down. That hasn't happened for a year. And I just knew then it was totally different. Wow. And then from there, the dose got elevated to the level where it's consistent across the day. And now I'm back moving normally, completely. Well, if this is normal, whatever normal is for me. But in terms of the physical rehab, I can now actually do the physical rehab on my left foot, on my shoulder, and I can get back stronger because the core stability required from the areas in your brain that do it automatic with the regulated area of dopamine, for me, had just completely shut off. So to walk around, I had to tense my belly. And then you can imagine trying to walk around with your body tensed. Not only do you look like a stiff, you feel like a stiff as well. And just to have that release and relax, I was just like, it's just amazing. It's just unbelievable. Wow. And basically in the space of a week, I was back from completely gone to back to normal. And it took my wife and my family a lot longer to adjust to me being back to normal than, because for me, I felt it. I knew it wasn't going away. I knew that every time I took that tablet in the morning, within half an hour, I was fine. But because that had so many false starts along the way, they were just waiting for me to crash again. Waiting because they'd seen me crash so many times. I'd come back from see some chiropractor. So I found the magic thing here. And then I'd be like, no, I haven't. I was like, boom. So yeah, I think really what that spoke to me is like and that was only a few months ago. So I started getting better. Take the first tablet at the end of July. And by mid-August, I was back to being me. It's better than ever. And then I think from then, that's really when I decided to do the podcast, because I was like, it seems a shame not to share information with people. And for example, there'll be someone listening to this that it really hits home with. They've been like smashing caffeine to a level that makes you feel guilty about it. Like, that's not proud of drinking like 10, 15 cups of coffee a day just to kind of like feel normal. And then when you don't have it, like running around trying to find the next coffee shop because you just think you're an addict. Well, you are an addict essentially, but you're doing it just trying to get back to baseline, not trying to get high. So yeah, I think that taught me a lot of things. It taught me when someone has real mental health issues, you really don't know what it's like until you have been that low that you want to end it all. But second of all is you just need belief. You just need, I don't know, I cry now. You need someone to believe in you. To make it through. Yeah. Just still hits home when you've been that low at certain times. To come out the other side. And I know if there's a few people listening to it, it gives them a bit of belief. It's worth every bit of vulnerability to share my story, because I know what it's like. Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of sharing, I think if you've got things to share, it doesn't matter if it's two people, if it really helps, it really does make a difference. So I would encourage anyone who is feeling like that to have some belief, or just a belief that someone believes in you, that it can be different, because you never know what's around the corner. I didn't think it was going to be for me. Yeah, to go from as low as that to back out the other side it fills you with gratitude to be able to share things. But also, like, I know if someone's really struggling, they don't need advice from me. They just need someone to listen to. They just need someone to listen to them and not necessarily tell them what to do because they've tried it all, but just sit with you and listen. So, yeah. I think I was going to cry, but there we go. Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, from the podcast perspective, that's kind of like a big thing for me is I don't care whether two people listen to my podcast or not. If there is some people out there who really helps, then it's worth spending the time doing it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. As you say, if it hits one person, that's very, very powerful stuff. And, I'm so happy to see where you are now. And I cannot imagine what this is like, this person sat here in front of me, how your family are kind of feeling. And let's just, take this opportunity to speak about your wife, Danny. And,
I mean, it's like, you just don't realize in those times when you're in those desperate situations how much family and people who really love you mean. I mean, so I got my wife Danny to sort of write it down, because she was struggling to come to terms with what had happened, and all of a sudden I'd gone from basically broken with no hope to back to normal. It was really hard for her to process, so I suggested she wrote it down, and so we've just kind of put it on the blog as well, on the Glucose Never Lies, to really, hopefully, people who are supporting people in that place can have a voice to what it is really like. I've read it twice, and I don't think I'll ever go back and read it a third time, not because it's an amazing piece, but because it hits home to me just how bad of a position I was in, but how much it impacts the people around you and how much they love you and are so desperate to help but feel helpless. But as I've said to Danny many times, although you might have felt helpless, at times it was the only thing that kept me going. And I think there'll be so many people who are listening who are in that situation where they're just like, I don't know what to do. I'm not doing enough. You are doing enough. You're just being there until the opportunity comes for things to be better. You just got to hold that space for them because they need you to hold that space. And yeah, so I struggle to go back and read that for that reason, but I've read it twice, and it's enough to make me realize that there's people out there who just need to hold on and help people hold on. And like my kids, they didn't even ask me to go out and play outside. They just come and sit down, watch TV with me. And I joke with my son. We're the only son and dad team who've played probably at least 50 games of Monopoly, and he's winning 30-20. That's the limitation to what I was down to. Literally sat down playing Monopoly for hours on end, but he'd sit there with me. He's like 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old. He'd just sit there with me, just want to be with dad. And when you think, is it worth staying around? You realize to them, sitting around and playing Monopoly is enough. Doing whatever you can do as long as there's love there is enough. And I think that, after being a very active person, I didn't think I'd ever say that, but seeing what it meant to the kids and obviously what it would have done to the kids, it's just having belief and holding on. And your support network, if you're in that support network, you don't have to fix people. You just need to give them belief and help them hold on until something comes that helps them. And who knows what that's going to be, and you don't know. And that's where sometimes you have to have blind faith. But without that blind faith, there's nothing else. So I would just say, like, keep hold of that for whoever, yourself and whoever you're supporting.
Yeah. And beyond the medication for the ADHD, how has that diagnosis given you kind of...
it's given me another card to play. So I already had the T1D card. So I can't do this because I'm low. I can't wash the pots because I'm low. I've now got the ADHD card. So I'm infamous for sending out emails at like 6 o'clock in the morning that are 2 pages long. I just say now, I'm sorry, but it's just my brain. Like, this is how it works. I'm sorry. This is like the ADHD pass. So, I'm sorry about that. So I just own it. Like, it's just the way that I am. So, but before that, I'd get embarrassed. I'd be like, I'd send an email and I'd be like, oh, what did I do for? And I'd like, oh God, going over it, like killing myself. And I was like, it's just the way my brain works. It just, if I don't get it out, it's going to cause me distress. So I just get it out. Like the number of times we were doing a research paper or something, I'll even send out, I go, I'm sending this draft out. By the way, don't read it. I'll be sending another one tomorrow or another one the day after. But if I don't let it go now, I won't be able to sleep. So do with it what you want, but don't look at it for 2 days. It's just, I can't even put it in drafts. It's just got to go now. It's got to go now. But I'll just usually preface it with something like that. So I guess it's just knowing how your brain works and then being able to, even if you can't, there's nothing to fix. It's just who you are and what you are, but helping people understand it and also putting things in place so that it causes as little disruption as possible.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, whether that information, that diagnosis has allowed you to put things in place because you have the context now and the framing of, the behaviors and the actions more so than you did before. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Okay, so last question. What's the ongoing mission, with that in mind, for the Glucose Never Lies?
That's a really good question. I don't fully know the answer. So I think, what would I like? I've gone down to 3 days at work so that I can actually spend probably 3 days realistically. 3 days making sure that the podcast is what I'd want to listen to, which is the most important thing for me, is like, what would I want it to be like? So I want it to be as good, so I would listen to it. And my North Star is Peter Attia, The Drive. You may or may not have listened to it. But he loves a super deep dive, but he's also very relevant in terms of bringing back. He's like a longevity doctor, but he's like the only person I would listen to on a podcast. So that's my mission, is to make the Glucose Never Lies, the type 1 diabetes equivalent of that. Probably not to the same nerdy level, but in terms of making cutting edge science available and accessible to people with type 1 diabetes in a digestible format that is practical enough to be useful, but also deep enough to really get so you believe in it. It's like I'd never just believe in someone just because they said it was a good thing to do. I need to know why. So I want to provide that why in a context way. So I want to spend some time doing that. So with that obviously comes funding. So if you've listened to it and you want to do the buy me a coffee thing on the link page, please go ahead. It would make my life easier. It'd probably mean that I don't get hammered by my wife as much because I'm disappearing into the office again to record another episode, or getting up at 3:00 in the morning because there's some crazy project that I want to do. It'd be nice to have some more time to do that. But at the same time, I've also approached some of the diabetes companies for education grants and things to make sure that the quality is good, is what I would say. So my only real mission is to make sure that the quality is good. And the cadence of the episodes and the website developing will just depend on how much time I get from whatever finance comes in. But I'd also never want to lose doing some research and also being at the front end with families, what it's really like. Because the moment you step away from that and you take your feet from the ground, you just, whatever you're doing is just not relatable because you don't know whether it's going to work or not. So I guess probably a dual thing, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Certainly, I do not want to become an influencer anytime soon. I don't even run my own social media. I have to get a colleague to do it. I'm that bad with it. So I got no intention of anything like that.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you take the essence of the word, you have very much influenced me today. So yeah, for that I am incredibly grateful. There's a lot of links that I can provide and will provide in the episode description. You've given so much, but where can people find you if they want that kind of starting point to?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, if you type in the glucose levelizer into Google, that'll take you through to the site. Or if you put that into either one of your favorite podcast players, the episodes will be on there. What I would say is, like anything, dip in and out to the stuff that speaks to you at the time. So I tried to put on the homepage, the first thing is like, start here. These are all the things that are on here in list order of how I would go through them if I was newly diagnosed. But whatever floats your boat, just dip in and out. If you want to know about the story, read further down. If you just want to go straight to this, kind of go for it. So, and also I am well open for feedback. One thing, takes me back to the start of research. Dr. Suma Ude is my sort of academic mentor and is a good friend now. This is probably 2019. She's like, I'll help you do the research thing. Like, okay, good. So he said, well, send me the first draft. So I sent her the first draft. And he just came back and said, I'm not going to comment on this. I'm just going to have to say, we've got a lot of work to do. Start by redoing it all. But for me, like, I love direct feedback, improvement fuel. Let's kind of go for it. So if people have got stuff that they want to go through, or like, do you know what, this needs improving, whatever, just tell me. Like, you can email me, it's on the site. I'll be more than happy to receive that information. However, if I don't agree with you, I'll also send you back going, this is why you're wrong. So don't be afraid for a bit of feedback too if you're going to give me some.
Fair. That is very fair. I can't thank you enough for this episode. It has blown me away from an information point of view, from a human point of view, and from, all sides. So yeah, just, if I wasn't already indebted to you, I certainly am now. Thank you for your time. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1-on-1. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.